Hi guys, so let's now take a look at economic unions. So when it comes to economic unions, we're really dealing with a common market plus a customs union. So what this in effect does means that there is a common external policy regarding trade. So that's likely to be through a common external tariff. There'll be common policies on product regulation, but there'll also be freedom of movement and the factors of production. So labour and capital goods can easily move between different areas, okay? Now, in addition to that, the entrepreneurial enterprise can also move between countries very, very easily. So there is that freedom of movement, and that's really, really important. Such examples, of course, include the European Union, as well as the Eurasian Economic Union, and also Mercosur, which is a number of South American countries which have joined together to actually form an economic union. That consists of Brazil, Argentina, Paraguay, and so on. So there are a number of good examples that can be cited in relation to this. Now, potential benefits when it comes to setting up an economic union, well, it's about increasing exports, of course. So you would want to try to increase your exports to your neighbour countries. That, of course, boosts employment. It would boost aggregate demand. It may also be supported by increased inward foreign direct investment, so that could be beneficial. There may also be an increased supply of labour. Certainly the UK has seen this with regard to labour coming from Eastern Europe and working in our agricultural sector, which has arguably been very beneficial to producers in that area of work, and has actually meant that consumers can enjoy lower prices for their goods as a direct result of that increased supply of labour and cheaper labour supply. So it may also reduce input costs because you can now actually get inputs or component parts for your final manufactured goods from your neighbouring countries, and as such, with no tariffs, then you might be able to get those goods at a cheaper price. That could further reduce your costs. You can exploit greater economies of scale because you can target a wider marketplace. There's going to be increased competition. This is going to promote efficiency, choice, and quality. So there's a number of benefits there for consumers that will help to keep the price of goods very competitive, of course. Now, there could also be labour regulations which are introduced to protect the workforce in each of these different countries and make sure that there are similar policies actually utilised across the area. So in addition to this labour regulation, you can see I've put product regulation. You may be quite familiar with the CE mark that you'll see on the back of phones and so on, just really reflecting the fact that that product is safe and fit for purpose within the EU Economic Union. Okay, in addition to this, there may be support for particular industries. So the European Union, of course, the EU, provides the common agricultural policy to support agricultural producers across the EU. It's quite a controversial area of policy because it's direct government intervention, involves a huge amount of subsidies, as well as various other interventory methods, and as such, it's not terribly popular with free marketeers, but nevertheless it has supported farmers. Then we've got the opportunity for our workers actually having employment opportunities abroad, and that could be something that you consider to be an advantage. Finally, and this is a big one, is it going to create trade? So is it going to lead to trade creation where now actually you can really enjoy the fact that countries exploit their comparative advantage freely because of the removal of any sort of trade restrictions between countries, such as tariffs and quotas. So does that mean now actually economic welfare will be increased overall? What about the costs? Well, structural adjustment, okay. This is an important one. that there may be structural changes which come about to the economy as a result of being exposed to that increased competition that we've actually talked about there. Now, the increased supply of labour could, in some areas, depress wages, and that may lead to a certain amount of resentment towards your neighbouring countries that you've actually signed up with this economic union with, okay? So it can depress wages in some sectors. Now, there's also the chance of higher taxes as well, and that is really to support the political element that has to go into making sure the economic union actually works and the bureaucracy involved in doing this, okay? So it could mean that there's higher taxes. In addition to that, if you're providing support through subsidies here, then, well, that's got to be paid for somewhere. So we can also see that there might be increased regulation. It's also argued that multinational corporations can lobby the powers that be within the economic union to deliberately put policies in favour of them and against smaller firms and against foreign competitors. Okay, so that may mean that smaller domestic firms could actually struggle to compete, and that can pose a problem and of course lead to that structural unemployment. Final point here, is it going to lead to trade diversion? So is setting up this economic union, this trading bloc with the common external tariff, is that actually going to divert trade away from the most efficient producers in the world and therefore lead to a reduction in overall economic welfare? Well, you know, that's a crucial point regarding Brexit, really. Is it, or sorry, that's a crucial point regarding Brexit. Has the EU actually led to trade creation, or has it led to trade diversion? You get big evaluative marks in being able to comment on that sort of theme there. Okay, so finally, here we go. Here's our evaluative points, and that's our first one, of course. Will it cause trade creation or trade diversion? So joining any of these economic unions, what's the benefit? Is it going to cause that benefit? So let's now look at our evaluative points. Well, this one's a biggie, this first one. Number one, will it actually cause trade creation or will it cause trade diversion? And you can consider the EU within that example. Has the EU actually created trade and therefore led to increased economic welfare of member states, or has it diverted trade? In all likelihood, it's going to likely vary between different regions, and as soon as you actually start focusing on specific areas or specific products, then you get huge marks for being able to do that. Okay, so that's an important area to focus on. Number two, benefits to some, maybe costs to others. So we can see that this increased supply of labour may help to actually reduce costs for agricultural producers, but that could also cause other problems such as increased unemployment and structural Okay, so first evaluative point, will it cause trade creation or trade diversion? So has the EU created trade or has it diverted trade away from the most efficient economic producers in the world? So therefore, has economic welfare overall been reduced or increased as a result of the UK's EU membership? Well, that's a really difficult question to answer, but you get big marks for just posing that question and then perhaps being able to cite examples of where there are instances of trade creation or trade diversion. Huge marks we're talking there. Okay, so number two, that there could be benefits to some, but there may be costs to others. So for instance, if a European firm is really exploiting these economies of scale, then it's going to really hurt domestic firms perhaps that can't compete on price. So if you break down the benefits to some and the actual fact that there could be costs to others, again, you get big marks. What about regional variations? Yes, there may be large structural unemployment in some areas, but many other areas could actually benefit from being in an economic union. So that's another interesting point. How are benefits also measured? How do we actually assess whether any economic union has actually been a success or not? It's very difficult to quantify those effects, and those effects are likely to vary on which economic agent you're focusing on. Can we estimate the impact had Britain actually not joined the EU in the first place? Well, not really. No, not really. We can't. For all the will in the world, it's so difficult. There's so many variables that it's just too difficult to do that. But once again, you'd get big marks for actually understanding the fact that actually measuring that outcome otherwise would be almost impossible. And then number 6, what about the Brexit negotiations? What sort of outcomes can we expect? What sort of impact might this have on various sectors of the economy or various economic agents in particular? So again, you get big marks for there, and you want to try to keep up to date with the latest news on this hotly debated issue. Okay, great stuff, guys. I hope that's been useful. See you next time.